Jumbo, welcome. You are listening to Operation Power. Joining us, a voice for Black radical politics and revolutionary change. We come to you each Thursday from 7 to 8 Eastern Time, and we're glad that you are with us on this podcast. And we're a part of Black Power Media, and we're so glad to be a part of the offerings that they have. My name is Inez Barron, and I am co-host along with my husband, the bold, the outspoken, the unbought, the unbossed, the one and only indomitable
Charles Barron, and it's always a humbling honor for me to be on with this powerful sister right here, my queen, the beautiful, stunningly beautiful, as you can see, brilliant mind intellectually, Inez Barron, my wife of 43 years. My brothers, I made it to 43 just last week, was our 43rd anniversary, so I'm working on 44. But this is my wife of 43 years, and I'm a happily married Black man. Inez Barron, bold and beautiful.
Thank you so much. We're glad that you're joining us. And we've got an exciting program for you today. Black radical youth speak out on the government shutdown, the future of capitalism, and the need.
The failure.
The failure. Well, that's part of their future is failing.
There you go.
The failure of capitalism and the need for revolution. We've got 3 exciting young people that are going to be joining us shortly. But we want to first tell you a little bit about our program. We're going to start our program with a libation. We believe that a part of our gathering, we want to honor our ancestors and call them in and invoke their blessings on all that we do. And we do have a video that we prepared, that we have selected, that will bring us through the libation portion of our program. So we're going to start with the libation.
For African people, nothing important happens without a libation. And so for this very important presentation, we begin by the pouring of libation. We pour libation first to our first ancestor, to that hidden one who, though hidden, manifests in all things as all things, that God-goddess idea in the universe by any and all names. To our first ancestor, we pour libation, Ashe. We pour libation too to our ancestors because they were the first people on this planet, mothers and fathers of all mankind, flashpoint of the human family. To those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to our ancestors because they were the ones who first gave birth to the idea of civilization, knew we would need a form of governance, and they nurtured that idea along the Nile until it reached its zenith in Kemet. There they built these gigantic monuments as evidence of that great civilization, and they carved instructions on the walls of temples and tombs for us, so we would never forget. To those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to our ancestors because over time they put together all the tenets of civilization and they took those ideas and left the continent. They were the people of the first Exodus. They left Africa and went all over the world and peopled the world. To those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe. We pour libation too to our ancestors because they did not sit on their laurels. They continued to improve, continued to evolve, and at each point of evolution, they again would leave the continent and settle and resettle the planet. They met themselves coming and going. To those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to those ancestors because over time, they found themselves the object of a forced exodus when they were kidnapped, shackled, cargoed, shipped out of Africa and enslaved in diasporas around the world. To those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to the ancestors left at home, the very young, the aged, the infirm, left to reinvent themselves, depleted of us, human resources. But they were enjoined by us in the diasporas, both objects of a global myopia that ruptured the soul of a people as it ravaged a continent. To those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to those ancestors because over time they began to remember who and what they were. Because no matter where they had been dropped off, they still retained bits and pieces of who and what they were. They retained that African core that described them. They began to remember bits and pieces of a song. They began to remember lines from a rhythm. They began to remember dances that they did in ancient times. They began to remember those ancient drum beats that they now beat out on bare skin. And so to those ancestors, we pour libation. I shave. Pour libation too to them, because they then began to teach each other. They began to resurrect and reconstruct that history and that culture. They became the new Africans wherever they were. They became the new teachers, preachers, archaeologists, the new singers, dancers, the new drummers, the new Jaliyah. They reconstructed that history and our culture and became new Africans everywhere. So to those ancestors, we pour libation. I shave. Pour libation.
Asheo. Thank you so much. We want to thank our engineer, Brother Kiru, who's behind the scenes bringing us to you. Well, again, this is Operation Power, a voice for Black radical politics and revolutionary change. And we come to you each week, and we're Operation Power, and we want to tell you a little bit about our organization. Charles and I, as has been said earlier, have been representing our community in East New York and parts of Brownsville and parts of other areas that are adjoining. And we've served in the city council, and we have served in the state assembly. And we have been able to bring great results. We've delivered on the things that our community sent us to those bodies to achieve. And we do have a brief video that we're going to share with you. It's an introductory video talking about Operation Power and some of the things that we have done and how we got our start. So, Ariel.
Operation Power stands for people organizing and working for empowerment and respect.
Operation Power is a grassroots social justice organization founded by local community stakeholders, which includes activists, organizers, and leaders who understand that the system as it is currently structured is destroying us and our communities.
The system, the capitalist system, one that promotes human greed over human need, one that promotes profit over people, needs to be dismantled. These local community organizers recognize capitalism needs to be destroyed and replaced with socialism.
Operation Power was founded in 1997 with the understanding that uprooting capitalism needs to begin locally. Operation Power understood that our communities are the perfect vehicle to dismantle this parasitic capitalist system brick by brick, and the economic, political, and cultural institutions and other systems in place in our local community infrastructure. Whether it's the local school board, community board, city council, state assembly, all represents mechanisms to control the destiny of our people.
In 1997, Operation Power launched the campaign Charles Barron for City Council that would lead to over 20 years of radical changes in the East New York community. These changes included over 20,000 units of housing affordable to our community, 3 $88 million schools, over $110 million secured and allocated for community parks, millions secured for library upgrades, and another $42 million for the construction of a new library. Well, there you have it, part of what we've done and some of the accomplishments that we've had. And we do want to recommend some reading for you. There are some books that are germane to what it is that our struggle is about. And one of them is Operation Power, Speaking Truth to Power. And it's written by Charles Barron, and it's a collection of articles and essays and thoughts that he has had. Second one is It's Not You, It's Capitalism, Why It's Time to Break Up and How to Move On. And that was written by Malika Jabali. And it's a great introductory piece. Capitalism gives you a lot of basic information. The next one is a novel written by Kevin Barron, and the title of the novel is Black Rising. It's a real page
Yes, it
turner,
is.
a real thriller. When you start it, you give yourself a couple of hours to be able to finish. And the second, also written by Kevin Barron, is the second in a trilogy, and it's Black Rising, Home and Abroad. And you can get all of these books online. And the third one in the trilogy, written by Kevin Barron, is The Threat. All of them are novels, and we encourage you to go
Mhm.
online, Barnes and Noble, where you'll be able to make those purchases. Well, once again, our topic for today is Black radical youth speak out on the government shutdown, the failure of capitalism, and a need for revolution. And we've got three young guests who are joining us for our program, and we're inviting them to the stage. We've got Adris Shiwa from the Palava Collective and Black Solidarity Coalition. We have Kayla Williams, who is a scholar and an organizer from Rose from Concrete, also a member of the Black Solidarity Coalition. And we have Amadou, who's Black Men Build, and he's joining us also from the Black Solidarity Coalition, Amadou Andre. Our three guests, welcome. You can unmute yourselves, and we are so glad that you have joined us.
Peace, y'all. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Adris, you're open. We'll start with you. You can make a brief introductory remarks and introduce yourself or share some
Yeah,
thoughts with us, and then we'll move onward.
definitely. So, hello, everyone. My name is Idru Shirwa. I'm a member of the Palava Collective, a Pan African socialist organization based out in Brooklyn. We do a lot of work regarding the housing crisis in New York City, but it's not a crisis because capitalism itself is a crisis and creates that. We do a lot of international solidarity work. We stand in full solidarity with all people fighting against imperialism internationally. We also do a lot of work regarding the police brutality in our streets and against our people. And we just stand in full solidarity with all folks inside New York City as well that are actively fighting for freedom for their people. And we're a part of the Black Solidarity Coalition too. I should have put that down. Thank you for the inspiration, Kayla. Stand in full solidarity and full work with the Black Solidarity Coalition. So that's a bit about the organization.
Thank you so much. We'll move next to Kayla. Kayla, your mic is yours.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having us. Like Ederu said, my name is Kayla Williams, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. And from young, I've been made privy to and forced to reckon with the contradictions, that residents are forced to live with under capitalism. As a youth, we decided to struggle against this with a project that we started called Project Focus. That's actually the first time when we met Brother Charles Barron through Akinlabi of Seeds. So that was an educational program that a number of youth and I put together to bring tutoring, mentorship, academic support to local youth. And now that program has transformed. We've gotten older. We've crystallized our analyses and worked to design programs that we feel like are even sharper in our analysis and our response to the failures of capitalism. And so that's Rose from Concrete. And we recently joined on board to the Black Solidarity Coalition, where we are working with all the shining stars on here. So just very honored to be here tonight in conversation with you all.
Great. Thank you so much. And Amadou Andre, we'd love to hear from you now.
Peace, family. Peace, family. It's good to see everybody's faces once again. Thank you as well, Charles and Inez, for the time to be on here and just, share, continue doing this work. My name is Amadou Andre. I'm a member of Black Men Build, as well as a member of the Black Solidarity Coalition. For me, I grew up in a lot of organizing spaces. My father is an activist in the Haitian community, so I got to learn a lot about the contradictions of capitalist life here in America, as well as be privy, to the crimes that this country has committed against, nations worldwide, but also to just a strong sense of African history growing up. So solidarity with oppressed people has always been something that's important to me. Black Men Build in particular is a national organization. I'm from the Brooklyn chapter. really aiming to transform Black men from wherever they are now to Black men who can be community leaders and be active participants in revolution, and really fighting against white supremacy, capitalism, and patriarchy, because those are things that inflict a lot of our brothers. So it's really important for us to give a space, one, to work through those contradictions, but also give them pathways to actively being involved in revolutionary work once they understand those contradictions and how it tends to hold us back. Recently as well, we joined the Black Solidarity Coalition, really just in attempts to address the material conditions of Black people living in Brooklyn, New York City overall, and just understanding that, you know, instead of having all of these individual orgs fighting specific little battles here and there, we know the general things that our people struggle from. So it's high time that we also prove to the people that we're not fragmented, we're not incapable of unison, and really coming together to take that work seriously.
Thank you so much. Well, we know we're just coming out of a 42-day government shutdown. We know that people were denied their benefits to be able to make purchases for food. We know that people were laid off. We know that people were working without getting paid. And in fact, people were fired. So we've come out of that, and the government says that they have made a continuing resolution that will take us through January the 31st. But let's share your ideas on that. And let's start with Kayla. Kayla, you want to talk to us about what you see from that shutdown?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the responses that we're seeing, especially to the shutdown, for me is like, it seems like a page right out of the capitalist playbook, right? Especially of pointing fingers at one or the other. I saw this news article today that said the White House put on their site, oh, the Democrats had us in a shutdown for 43 days, right? Each of them is pointing fingers at the other party in attempts to hide from the masses the fact that this is a systemic failure, right? And I think that's a major learning that I appreciate being able to really experience this year. And that's that this system is in a state of decline, right? And there are multiple ways that you can slice it and look at it. If you're looking in terms of GDP growth, right? If you're looking in the 50s and 60s, the annual GDP growth rate in the 50s and 60s was 4%, 5%, upwards of that. And it's been in decline ever since. And if you're looking more recently, it's 1%, 2%, and projected to be even lower, right? When you're looking at the cost of living for everyday people, that's grown in the past 50 years, 3.5 times more so than wages for typical workers. Right. And if you're looking even at wealth concentration, the top 1% holding 30% of the wealth, while the bottom 50% hold 2.5%, you know, and they're coming and arguing in our faces about, you know, like how much benefits to give us. It's really, you know, it's disrespectful, honestly. Like they're arguing about how many crumbs should be divided amongst the majority, amongst the masses. And so as I'm looking at, you know, the way that they're speaking about the shutdown, I feel like my main takeaway for myself, you know, and for my comrades and those listening is for us to not be deceived, right? Not be fooled by them, and don't be distracted, because this shutdown is once again just one any bitty piece in the face of a much larger systemic failure that we're seeing progress over the decades.
Thank you. And Brother Amadou, we know that this is not the first time the government has had a shutdown, and it's not just akin to the machinations of any one party. So why don't you share your ideas upon that with us?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think what this particular shutdown shows, but all of the shutdowns in the past have shown us effectually, is that these two parties, these main parties, the Democratic and Republican parties, they're very disconnected from the intricacies of basic human life, right? I think even the idea that you could have a quote unquote government shutdown, and I put it in quotes because for me, the question is always shut down for who? You know, is it truly that things aren't operating, or are we choosing that certain things simply are not important to us right now? Because what I highlighted last time, and, you know, highlighting this again, was Border Patrol, ICE agents were still paid throughout this whole shutdown. Democrats Republicans were still paid throughout this shutdown. There may have been some lower level members of both of these parties who received pay cuts or weren't receiving their salary pay, but for the most part, it was business and oppression as usual, right? So if there really is a shutdown, everybody should be unable to move forward. But if it's only the working class people whose benefits, whose different accesses are being cut, then you really have to ask the question of why is it even being labeled that, right? And I think even with how the Democrats decided to capitulate, to the demands of the Republican Party in this sense, even that is important to see, because what I look at that as is almost like a setup for future elections, because it allows them to put people in this predicament where, because they allowed the Republicans to run ramshot, they can now position themselves as the moral choice or the right choice, all while doing the absolute bare minimum. Every single time there's an election on any level, it's not very easy and it's not very difficult, pardon me, to gain working class people's support. If you advocate for human rights and basic needs, the community will almost always respond to that, which I think everybody on this call as community organizers can agree with, right? So if you really cared about justice or rights or, allowing people good living, you would advocate for the things that matter to them, right? And that never seems to be the stuff that's on their agenda up until the last minute when things are so bad that it's quote unquote vote blue no matter who. So I think if we continue to allow them to get away with a lot of these things, it kind of gets to a point where, how do we feel about ourselves? When will we decide that we're tired of giving up power to these people and expecting them to advocate for us while they constantly show us they really couldn't be less concerned with what's going on in our lives on a day-to-day level? So it's definitely, anti the two-party system and more involving in community grassroots organizations, because we're the only ones who are really going to take care of each other.
Right. Brother Adarus, your thoughts and share your ideas with us.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, people are saying this government shutdown was a failure, but I don't think it was a failure because what were they ever fighting for? They already have that power. This was a show at its highest level. And they talked about how they're fighting for healthcare. Democrats 100 years they give us healthcare. They were told, let's get Medicare for all. And the guy running for it, they turned against them. So the Democrats, this shutdown was for nothing but a show for nothing. And we understand that Republicans and Democrats have been on the same side. But I will say, though, to them, I'm not going to argue it was a failure or not, but it was a horrific crisis for real people, real working class people. You saw flights were shut down. TSA agents and other people within the flight system were not getting paid or were laid off and fired. You had people who are out on food stamps for more than 10 days. People are talking about this government shutdown, and we understand this is a black issue. Because, and again, this is a New York City issue as well, because there's 42 million Americans who get, I know my camera froze, but hopefully I can understand me talking. But there's 42, there we go, that's what matters. There's 42 million Americans that are food stamps, but there's 1.7 million people in New York City that have some sort of SNAP. And we understand that they try to say our benefits were paused, but these are not benefits, these are scraps. Like, the government is not the hand that feeds us, we're the hand that feeds it. And when this government was shut down, Congress people were still getting paid. Like Amadou said, people in ICE were still getting paid. Federal agents were still getting paid. But those TSA workers were not getting paid. You had other federal workers still getting laid off. So this was a crisis for our people. And that's the reason why when we wanted to do the work, we decided as collectively, us at the Palavra Collective and Black Men Bill said, even though the government shut down, revolution cannot. The government can go on pause, but revolution cannot. So we kept struggling doing the work. So no matter, and throughout history, I'm just going to say, this government shutdown showed it happened with Clinton and it happened with Obama. So don't come and say it's a Republican issue. This is capitalism. This is an issue of Western imperialism. And it's just the same power grab they do every 4 years. So it was a crisis. It was a failure to us. But to them, this was expected. This was the same plan they use every few years to blame someone else. Whether they red, whether they blue, they capitalists and they want green money. And I'm not on that side. So, as Kay laid out a lot of statistics right there, that's some serious stuff going on. It affected real people. So that's what I want to say right there.
Well, to those of you who are viewing this show, look at our future. We are in good hands.
Yes.
We are in real good hands. These brothers and this sister, and there's more like them. We're fortunate that they're in New York City. Sorry about that, y'all. They're in New York City. So we are honored and fortunate to have them. And the reason why we want to have them on our program, we're going to have them come back again and again. We need a fresh, radical, revolutionary perspective on what's going on, not just a liberal versus conservative and left, right, but this is what we're talking about. And I'm so impressed with these expressions now. These are the things that even old heads like me, we got to hear it, and others got to hear it so we can move forward. Now, let's get tough on this stuff. We talk revolution. There's a difference between reform and revolution. Some say we use reform as a tactic to achieve revolution. So when you say revolution, what do you mean? What do you mean by revolution? What is the alternative to the two-party colonial capitalist duopoly, racist, colonialist, classist, xenophobic, you name it. Every ism you could think of is how bad this system is. But how do we get rid of it? And what's the alternative? Anyone?
I can start. Hopefully my camera doesn't pause this time.
We're good. We see you.
There we go. I think the capitalists heard what I was saying. They got a little nervous, They don't want my handsome face on the screen sometimes. But in terms of revolution reform, again, you see Democrats and Republicans, and oftentimes they try to make it seem like there's such a difference. Like every year people are like, our lives are at stake. We got to vote for Kamala. Our lives are at stake. We got to vote for Blue. But when you look at the real issues and what they're really fighting for, they align on so much stuff. You see the power that AIPAC has in that congressional hall, the power AIPAC has no matter who's in office in the White House, the power that the capitalists have, the power that Wall Street has, they hold that power. And that's the thing. It's not the Democrats are in power, the Republicans are in power, the bourgeoisie are in power. So when we talk about revolution, we're not just trying to change who's in office in terms of party. We're trying to change who has the economic ownership in this society. A lot of communists here will say this right now we're living in the stage of the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, and we want to have the dictatorship of the workers, right? The ones who do the work. Because as I said earlier, right, we're not the government does not feed us. Food stamps were cut. But remember, the government does not feed us. We feed the government, right? It's not the hand that feeds. They just give us back the little scraps that we gave them. We gave them all this food. They eat all day and they give us little scraps. So in regards to that, if we're already doing the work and we have this capacity to generate so much labor, why should we generate it, get all the stuff that we have be stolen by these rich capitalists, by these rich bourgeois? The same thing that's going on across seas as well, who's getting less paid than Western people right here. The people in Africa, South America, you have all these affairs across the world. They do all this work and it all gets exploited. It all gets extracted from them. And it gets given back to them in the smallest of pennies, in the smallest of nickels. In reality, we should have a system and a society where it's not that we're fighting to get the scraps from our own work. We should be fighting for our people. When we do work, it gets distributed from the work that we do. And, in that stage, that's the whole transition. And when I say revolution, right, we're fighting for socialism. I'm just going to be straight up. We are fighting for socialism because right now, what's killing our people, what's hurting us is capitalism. The exploitation of our work comes in the exploitation of our labor, and all this other stuff, the violence that happens, the negative influences of culture and negative portrayals of our people, the imperialism and the genocide is all there to have people get exploited more and more. And it's going to reach a level where we can't take it no more. And it's already happened across the waters. They couldn't take it no more. So they fought for revolution. You saw that in Cuba, what they're doing. You see what happened in China. You see what happened all across the world. And right now, right here, we have our own battle. So when we talk about revolution, right, it's not just about changing who's in office. It's changing what that office means and who's fighting for us and what that, all these different power systems is. It's not just changing the electoral process, but changing the whole system in general. That's revolution. But yeah.
I want to just set a little message. Makes me hopeful. We're in good hands listening to y'all. So
they got to be talking about Amadou and Kayla.
Well, you too, man.
They're talking to all of you.
Kayla, what do you think about revolution reform? How do we get out of this mess we're in?
I think exactly as Ada Roos was alluding to, right, as naming concrete socialist examples that exist, I think those are the ones that we need to continue to draw our learnings from and be in solidarity with. You mentioned Cuba, I think you mentioned China, right? The US hates China, and China has seen advancements as a nation that no other country on the world has seen, right? Lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, which had the overall global effect of giving us a positive, increase in reduction in poverty. Without China, it would have been negative, right? They've increased their life expectancy rapidly, more rapidly than every other country, increased their GDP, right? Edarus also mentioned Cuba. A number of us had the privilege of spending time in Cuba this past December with some of our elders and comrades, right? And Cuba, who is under criminal sanctions and blockade by the US, right, is still able to ensure one, we learned there in their constitution that your rent cannot be more than 10% of your income, right? And we are allegedly in the richest nation in the world, right? And we're not able to ensure these very basic standards for our people. I don't think you mentioned Venezuela, but I think of them as well, right? This nation who had the gall to nationalize their oil is now under attack by the US, right? So I think that there are very clear examples out there. And I think that we're often told, once again, like Edarus was saying, like we must choose between these, lesser two evils, which I know you hate, Brother Charles. Right? Telling us that we have to choose between them because there's no other example. And that's propaganda, right? It's a lie, it's unscientific. Right? To say that there is no alternative is ahistorical. It's just not true. So when it comes to revolution and what it looks like, I think one, for us to like draw on these concrete examples that already exist and be in solidarity with those folks, and for us to organize to build dual power, right? So that within our own communities, like Edaru said, Palaver Collective and Black Men's Bill came together while the government was shut down to say, no, our people still need to eat, right? So for us to say, this is what we believe the standards need to be, and we're not going to settle for less just because you feel me, want to push this onto us. And I think finally it's necessary for us to, one, not settle for less, and two, prepare for the offensive that we know is going to come when we have the gall, right, and the audacity to say that we believe we deserve better and more is possible. And I think if we needed any sort of reminder that the attack would happen, look at Zoran. Right, Zoran, used language, stood aligned with calls that we have been making for our community for decades. Right, that we need affordability, that just the very basics. But he's not even a communist. He's, barely a socialist for him to speak out and to call Cubans and Venezuelan leaders, dictatorships. Right, and even still him under attack, right? Like he is, I think, like a calm and palatable, I think, example for
Did you say
socialism.
neoliberal? You said he was a neoliberal? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's my mistake. My
I told
mistake.
him you hate it. But right, if even he is under attack, right, what can we expect for ourselves who will not buckle to call ourselves socialists, right, and who will legitimately not settle for less? I think we have to be prepared for that, for sure.
Very well said. Very well said. Amadou?
Yeah, I'm so glad that a person commented just to let Ada Roos know it's the entire collective, because the people see you regardless of what you think, brother. But yeah, I want to say, I think for me, when I think about revolution, it's like both of you addressed so far about not settling for less, and just being willing to push that envelope. But to me, it also looks like a radical reimagination of what society should be. I think a lot of times we've spent time in ideological struggle about this is what we should settle for, or this is asking for too much, and if we ask for too much, we're gonna lose. But that's exactly where the enemy wants us to be, stuck in a position where they could sort of stay at the top, but offer us, maybe extra few concessions than what they said they were originally going to give us. And we consider that revolution because they're giving us 40% instead of 10, as if we have not created the 100%. You know what I mean? So I think just understanding that we do not have to be beholden to the systems and structures that they've put in our faces. I think prison is just one example of one of these ways in which reform has clearly shown us it's not possible, and it really doesn't work. Like, you could put more guards of a certain ethnicity in these areas across the country. It doesn't change the fact that the structure itself is inhumane. What inmates are going through, what our political prisoners are going through right now, it is things that human beings should never be subjected to, right? And I think we also have to ask ourselves, who is responsible for the creation of such inhumane institutions? And I don't say that just in terms of prisons. I say this in terms of our food industry. I say this in terms of our education industry. Who are the people who are allowed to make decisions as for how we're supposed to learn, how we're supposed to eat? They've been terrible leaders in all of these regards. And you can look at the condition of people living in communities and see the results of the systems that they've created. So I think it's really about that reimagination of saying, regardless of what the enemy has given us as a template, how do I actually believe human beings should live? And you run in that direction, regardless of what they tell you is possible or not possible. Because, I think one of the most powerful examples of this today when we talk about revolution is what's going on in Burkina Faso, in the Sahel. The things that Ibrahim Traore is doing, these are things you would spend years and years in courts debating with these people about. There you go, brother. I'm glad you got it ready. Telling you, oh, you can't change the language of the country like that. It would affect too many people. You can't rewire, you can't remake these roads. You can't change who gets salaries and how much they're paid in these government positions. All of these are things that you waste your time with the Democrats and the Republicans. You'd be arguing about it and you wouldn't even win. You know what I mean? Because ultimately, they're not really going to let you do something that deeply hurts their infrastructure that much. And just in a matter of a few years, since he's been in power over there in the Sahel, we can see the type of changes that are taking place in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Niger. So I think of that as like a complete systemic overhaul of not really doing too much back and forth with politicians about how we think you should live, and merely going in the direction of what is most dignified for the human being's life. And you pursue that all the way.
I promise you we're going to have a part 2 next week if necessary, because I'm going to ask you some unfair questions like, what's the difference between socialism and capitalism? And I know there's no one socialism, so let's be clear on that. There are different, versions of socialism depending upon who's saying it. And also, we know fundamentally it's about the means of production, a privatized economy, or a people's means of production control. And even when we mention terms like oligarchy, the oligarchy's in control. And by the way, Zoran is against the oligarchy, but he kept their child. He kept their family member. What's her name? Commissioner Tish. How could a socialist keep an oligarchy's child for commissioner of police? But in any event, just fundamentally, when our people hear socialism, they sometimes have this really uninformed opinion. Oh, I can't own my own business. There's no freedom of speech. There's no freedom of this, no freedom of that. So let's just have a little discussion. I promise I'll have y'all come back so we can get deeper, because this is an unfair question to ask you to explain in 2 or 3 minutes. But let's just have some discussion on the difference between capitalism and socialism. Adarus?
Okay. So, when you talk about, and I have a good friend, who really loves capitalism. He gets me mad sometimes. And the question I asked him, but the other day he told me, he said, oh, I really sounded like socialism. And one question that got him was, you work 40 hours a week. Let's say you make $80,000 a year and you're happy with that. Cool. If you're making $80,000 a year, you're making your company probably $300,000, $400,000 a year. And they're pocketing that and give you that little 80,000. And the thing is with socialism, the work that you do is given to the people, or you don't get exploited for the work that you do. Because you see throughout all society, whether it was capitalism, whether it was slavery, there's always a people in power that's exploiting people for their labor, right? And this is a dictatorship. This is a certain group of people that are exploiters. But now imagine society where it gets flipped upside down, where now you have the workers who can run society. And I think above all, as Cabral says, as Castro says, when we talk about socialism, it's not just about creating a new society, it creates a new man, right? It creates a whole new person. When you're in a socialist system, I'm not just going to talk about the economic factors of socialism, just in terms of society, the way people live and interact with each other. Everything you do right now in society is commodified. Every single thing that you do, you got love, Valentine's Day, you go and buying all these different things. When you doing, who you are as a person is fundamental on the work that you do. The first thing you go when you walking around, people say, what do you do for work? How much do you make? Especially in New York, when you don't do a job they like, when you're not making the salary they like, they look at you like, you something under them, And I think socialism outside the obvious economic factors where the workers are getting paid and they have ownership means of production. It's not just a few people who are owning everything. Socialism in itself is a whole new economic system, but also a new social system. Because hierarchy exists objectively in society off the economic level. And that also bleeds into the superstructure, right? Like our culture, our religion, the way we interact with each other as people. So, socialism, of course, the difference with capitalism, you have a small group of people who own the majority of everything, but they're not doing none of the work. The majority of people are doing the majority of the work. And then with capitalism as well, we understand it's international. You can't just talk about capitalism. And I'm going to pass over. You can't talk about capitalism without talking about the international element of it. Because the basis of capitalism in America right now is one of imperialism. It's the complete depravity of other countries for their labor, for their resources. And under socialism, right, that exploitation of our foreign brothers and sisters is not the case. So, and I'm not going to go into the next question. I'll pass off. Do we have a different advice on socialism? 100%.
Taylor?
I would really double down on a lot of what Edelus just said. I think the quote you said of socialism creates a new man. I feel like reminding me
that woman. Come on, Kayla.
Right.
Don't let them get away with this new man and new woman.
Thank you very much. And that exactly, right? It reminds me of conversations that we were having with people in Cuba, in Matanzas. That was a place where I remember we were getting a tour of a religious site, and some of us, took a slight detour and talked with different community members in the streets and asked them, what are your takes on Fidel Castro? What are your takes on socialism? There are understandings that they would like us to have and believe within the United States, but what is it for those of you who really live here? And two things that stick out to me are, one, I remember this person saying, and we learned about it, in different tours and areas in our time there too, but one of Fidel's first aims being there was he's like, we're going to be the first nation in the Americas to eradicate illiteracy, right? It's a very people first, human-centered and dignified way of looking at a nation and at a people. And I remember one of the women, one of the families we were talking about, she was saying, they came in and, she was a mother, a grandmother, and she's like, suddenly there's no thing that I can't do because I'm a woman. So I love that you said that, Brother Charles, right? It's like everything that is available, all the opportunities that were available to the men, right? Like were suddenly available to the women as well, because I see this question that popped up of, do we have a new value system under socialism? And exactly, we do. We're people-centered and not profit-centered. And I would say we're also scientific, right? And I think that's the main thing. They love to paint us as socialists as, oh, we're just these idealists living in a la-la land, right? But what is more divorced than science than, like Ederu said, right? For us to be producing, right, at the rates and at the levels that we are producing and then fighting for scraps amongst ourselves, right? Is that not the most unscientific thing? So I would say when I think of socialism, those are the things that I think of. I think of the change in values to be people-centered as opposed to profit-centered and profit-driven. And I think of us doing what is actually most logical and most scientific, and that is doing what our technology, what our science, and what our understandings allow us to do for people.
I'm gonna do.
Yeah. I've got nothing new to say because Kayla and Ada Bruce took the words right out of my mouth. But I would just want to highlight, that last point, that what I see the difference as between capitalism and socialism is capitalism is profit centered and the protection of private property, and socialism is human centered, but also about generosity and sharing whatever is generated. Because it's not to say, that point you made about the businesses. You can have businesses, but you can't have businesses that have people working for slave wages. That's the difference. And I think what a lot of people don't want to address when they talk about capitalism is the fact that they want to feel deserving of greed. And, ultimately, the issue is when you are in a socialist society, there is a limit to how you can have at the expense of other human beings, right? And one of the things that capitalism teaches us is that there should be no ceiling. But what I find also contradictory about that is we live in a country right now where you can have one person who is worth billions of dollars, but the federal minimum working wage is $7, I believe, in like 25 cents. And it's like, why would you have people living in a country where they can make an amount of money that cannot even pay their rent? So it's inhumane in nature, which is the aspect of capitalism that we really have to confront at the end of the day. Like, you can have your gripes about communism, you can have your gripes about socialism, but and Fidel Castro asked the same question. He's like, what has capitalism produced in the world? And when you look at what it's produced in the world, it's produced war, it's produced inequality, it's produced abuse, it's promoted selfishness, right? These are the things that you will inherently end up with under a capitalist system. And like what was mentioned, this is international. You can take America out of the equation and look at other capitalist places. These things always trickle down to the human level, even in terms of how we interact in community and in our families. This is why we have so many people who claim to be, for Black liberation, who instead of destroying the whole table altogether are arguing with you about how we can get a seat at the white man's table, right? So it just lets you know where people's heads are at. And I think that's one of the most problematic aspects of it. When I think of socialism, one of the main things, once again, is that idea of shared ownership, So it's not to say that we won't produce things, we won't invent things. All of this will still continue. It's just that as things get made and as things are done, it has to serve the human good to a certain degree, right? And once that human good is being served, we can move freely, and I think this is not even, once again, to Kayla's point, we can take the emotional and mental aspect out of it. Scientifically, there have been numerous studies done about what human beings do when their basic needs are met. When you give the task of working a job, for example, to someone who has maybe a 4-day or a 3-day work week, is not struggling to pay rent, is not struggling to figure out where their next meal is coming from, the ideas and the participation and just the overall desire to be in the workplace is something that, capitalists will tell you is logically impossible. Capitalists love to repeat that if we don't have this system of competition, human beings will just be lazy. They won't create anything. All of the research proves that that isn't true. Right. So at some point, we have to also confront the fact that these are myths that they're feeding us because they want us to stay as slaves. They want us to continue to believe that there's a limited amount of room for everybody to survive, and there needs to be an oppressed class. And in socialism, there doesn't need to be an oppressed class. Right. And ultimately, it's coming to terms with that.
Well, y'all did a great job on that one, and fundamentally, is what happens with the surplus value of your labor, the profit, the surplus value of your labor, the profit. Under capitalism, we can all work for a capitalist company, get a wage, and the profit from that company goes to the capitalist. So if we work to make that company $1 million and they pay us $1,000 each, then the surplus value of our labor goes to the capitalist. Whereas under socialism, the surplus value of the labor is determined by the people because there's cooperative ownership of the enterprise, not one person, but a cooperative ownership. And then the value system, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Some of us don't even have boots, but they got to realize that when you hear that kind of value system, to each his own, look out for number one, individualism over collectivism. These are the value systems of capital. And explain this. Why is it In all the countries that I visited, Cuba, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, you name it, healthcare is provided by the government, free to the people. Education is provided by the government, free for the people. In Libya, under Muammar Gaddafi, there is no homelessness. There wasn't any homelessness. How come in these countries that are less powerful and rich than America, food is so expensive, you come out cheaper eating your money? It's ridiculous. So I think y'all made the excellent point. I got to have y'all come back because we're going to get deeper into this. What is scientific socialism? What is revolutionary socialism? What is evolutionary socialism? There's a lot of pieces to it. So y'all are coming back so we can continue this discussion. But as we wind up this a bit, New York City, Zohran Mamdani, our coalition, our Black Solidarity Coalition, we have our work cut out. Because this is a man, as you said, Kyla, not only did he call Cuba and Venezuela dictatorships, he even met with a Zionist group and said, I might have to have Zionists in my administration. This guy, so now we have to go forward and we have to look at the acquisition of power. Let's talk about that. In the 60s, we said, Black power, Black power. Well, we did the black, but we didn't get the power. So let's end it on that note. How do we attain power? How are we going to deal with this new administration in New York City? And y'all coming back next week. But take a shot at it. Let's start with you, Amadou.
Yeah. So I always say that, power is the people, and the people's labor is really what it is. Wherever you direct the people's labor, that's where power is going to be. And ultimately, the reason why the enemy has so much power is because, for better or worse, they do control the majority of the people's labor. The people are not en masse yet at a point where they have more faith in us and our movement and our political ideology than they do the enemies. We do indeed still have more people who believe in this government, who believe in capitalism as a means to upward mobility. So it's ultimately getting the people's power on our side. One thing that I always like to highlight is the fact that even when changes happen in government and we start to use this as a rationale for this is why this president was better than this president because he passed this law. It's like all of these laws that even get passed in a quote unquote progressive direction, they only get passed because there's actual grassroots and other organizations on the ground fighting for them, right? And what you see these politicians doing is crumbling to the pressure of the people's demands, right? So when we look at that, it's understanding that these people don't make decisions out of the goodness of their heart or out of some moral conscience. They do what they do because it becomes unprofitable for them to continue trying to fight against us and stand against us. So we have to understand, how do we make the enemy lose profit, and how do we put the numbers on our side to gain things that would really benefit our lives? One of these ways, it looks like being involved in a community organization. If every person in their household had a regular conversation about participating in one of the community organizations, whether it be Black Men Build, whether it be Rose from Concrete, whether it be Palaver, whether it's joining us in the Solidarity Coalition, we would be so much further along, right? One of the coalition's efforts right now is in collaboration with Stopping Deed Theft, right? We have homes that are being stolen from Black people living in New York City. And these are people who have paid off their homes. They've done everything that the quote unquote capitalists tell you that you should do to get ahead. These are the people who've played by the rules. They did all of the things that you're supposed to do. And even still, they're finding themselves in a position where developers are coming into their neighborhoods, making fake copies of their deed, occupying their properties, tearing stuff down, and basically saying, regardless of how much work you put in or all of these rules that you followed, I've decided I want this now, so I will be taking it. And we have people in the courts who are complicit in this. We have people at all levels of political leadership who are complicit in this. So one of the things that we've decided to do is basically say, one, this is illegal. So they're going to have to provide paperwork, which they cannot provide because everything is forged on their end. And if they still decide to come back, they will have to deal with the wrath of the community because we are making sure that no one else trespasses on that property, right? So gaining power is as simple as something like that. It's saying that there is something that you're doing to our communities and the people aren't going to stand for it. Even a few weeks ago, Black Men Build Palava, we came together to participate in a food distribution where we were actively giving foods to people who were hungry. SNAP benefits are being cut. This is a way to build power because this is how you prove to the people that even when this corrupt government fails you, we the people and we the grassroots organizations will still be here fighting for you to make sure that you have what you need. So I consider power as gathering the people's forces, gaining the people's trust, and whatever you can do towards that, towards a revolutionary lens, is going to be building power in the right direction.
Right on. Kayla?
I think one, again, doubling down on everything you said, Amadou. And I think I would add in terms of the question of how are we going to deal with this administration, I think that the work just needs to continue, right? I think that Zoran will not be the person to bring socialism to New York City. It needs to be the continued and increased consistency of us as a people saying what our demands are, what we're not going to settle on, right? And continuing to organize, like we talked about, building dual power until we bring these things into effect. I think in terms of how I view Zoran, I don't inherently view him as an enemy, but I also don't view him as a savior. And as our elder and comrade Akinwumi has Agilami told us a quote, or is often telling us, like, don't fall in love with these leaders, right? And I think something that you yourself reference often, Brother Charles, is that a lot of people fell in love with Obama, right? And had their hearts broken. And that's especially what he says, don't have your hearts broken by these people. And so in terms of Zoran's victory, I'm not, cheering because he won. I'm cheering because the people decided that they wanted him in office and they put him in there, right? They're saying that we've seen some of the highest voter turnout that we've seen since the 60s. Right. And, this level of participation, I think, like Amadou was saying, what we need is for us as people to be in coalition and in solidarity and in unity so that they know that we are a force to be reckoned with. And so that's the way that I'm viewing things under his administration. Right. We want what the people want to be reflected in what he is doing. And when he falls short on that, I think it's important that we hold him accountable, right? Because we're not viewing him with rose-colored glasses, but we're also realistic in our expectations of him as well.
Ada Rules, we got 3 minutes.
I'll keep it short. I'm doing Kayla already hit on the head, but I'll just say, when it's cold in the winter, you get the more people get together, the more hate you produce. You're a carpenter, right? You're building a table. You're not gonna put two legs. You're gonna put 3 legs, right? So power is when we come together, right? Because you can't have power split apart. All this factionalism, everything like that. Talking about the Black solidarity, keyword solidarity coalition, coming together. Power is when we come together, because you can have Zoran in office, you can have Donald Duck in a suit. The thing is, they got to be scared of us. They got to know what we can do, and if we can get together, because as Amadou said, there has never been a change for the people that has come through policy that did not start in the streets. They give us stuff because they scared of us. And that fear only started because we organized. We are on the streets. People are educated and sharp because we're coming together in a community, a revolutionary community. We talk about the new man and new woman and a new person. And as we have these new people being built, we're creating a new movement, a new structure, a new organized structure. So we talk about power, but also power only comes with demands. Right? We can't just have all these people together in a room and do nothing. We have to have actionable and material demands. Because, all these other politicians can get 100,000 people. Kamala Harris ran for office when she opened up, got millions of dollars. She wasn't, they shut down the whole government. For what? They had no demands. So when we talk about power, we have to have people together. We have to have demands, and we have to have direction. And I look at power as people coming together always, because power only comes, it's scientific. We say the masses, the word mass is in there, right? It comes from the amount of people, but also what they're doing, where they're moving towards, right? Because if you just have a bunch of people standing still, that's no energy. That's no power. You have to have them moving. I think you have to have them moving towards socialism and towards revolution. I'm gonna leave it at that. But and power is black power. So
But
I just want to say
let
that.
me tell y'all something that, man, this was a great conversation. And it's good to have a partner because she'll hit you. You can't tell them to come back next week. We already have some programs. I got so excited. Y'all coming back next week and the week after that and the week. She said, Charles. So we'll let you know when you're coming back. But you are coming back. And I just wanted to say this was a great conversation. We appreciate you. And Malcolm said it best. When you think somebody is all that, time will tell. And that's the good thing about electoral politics. Time will tell. You could talk all the stuff you want, but you have to show. It's one thing about campaigning to win. It's another thing about governing. And time will definitely tell. And we're not sitting around waiting for time to tell, because there are three kind of people in this world in leadership: those who know what's happening, those who don't know what's happening, and us, those who make things happen. And that's what leaders do. We make things happen. We're going to shut up, but before we go, Inez, any closing comments?
Just want to say that you have been inspirational. You've given us some deep thinking material. Someone said they're taking notes about that. And I know that our organizations are in good hands, because the membership, as it has been demonstrated by your presentation here, and the depth and the critical analysis that you've given, is just rewarding. And our ancestors are pleased and proud to have you speaking on behalf of our people.
That's right.
And we look forward to having you come back again.
That's right.
And talk more in depth again about what it is that our people are facing and how we can come together to become more effective and even more powerful and get those systems and get those changes made. Because even Dr. Martin Luther King said, they're not going to change the rules, so we've got to change the system.
That's right. And so we want to let everybody know that we're also a part of the Black Solidarity Coalition. Ain't just these young folk here. Got some old heads up in there too. We're in there with the Nation of Islam. We're in there with Gregory X from Hood Therapy. We also Simultap with Dr. McIntosh is a part of it. Black Men Bill, of course. UNIA, Marcus Garvey's organization, and coordinating all of this is the December 12th movement. This is going to be a powerful thing. Y'all haven't seen anything yet. You watch us work. But that's it for this week. And we say every week, the truth shall set you free, and power is the great equalizer. Black power.
Black power.